Welcome back to the podcast. I have Kyle Wilkinson here today. He is flybum_101 on the old Instagram. He's a guide for Bear Paw River Guides and the co-host of the Young Guides podcast. Thanks for being on here, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jeff.
So you're in Anchorage right now.
Yep.
And what is the current fly fishing situation between now and when the guide season starts to get running?
Probably won't be doing a ton of fly fishing between now and the guide season. We'll start guiding here probably around breakup. Once the Sioux breaks up, we're mainly up on Willow, Little Willow, those Parks Highway streams. Once that breakup happens, I'll be up there fishing, personal fishing, the mouths of some of those creeks where those trout and grayling stack up. Before they start moving their way up rivers, things start to warm up. And then once the fishing gets good, once we start seeing more fish upriver, we'll start doing float trips down Willow. But yeah, that's pretty much the fly fishing scene is probably going to be around breakup, which last year it seemed like it was about mid-May to late May, then really getting rolling into June. But the weather could change. I mean, yesterday here in Anchorage, we got like a foot of snow. And then today it's almost 40 degrees out. So who knows what it's going to look like.
That's got to be tough. Is there, like, we have some steelhead down here. Is there anywhere in that area that has steelhead, or they come up the Kenai, right? Some?
Yeah, over on the peninsula, they have a few in some of those rivers. I'm personally not super in touch with the steelhead down there, but I know some of those like the Anchor and stuff, they have a few steelhead, but yeah, we don't really have any steelhead up here in the Anchorage area.
Yeah, I got some buddies in Anchorage that talk about heading down to the southeast to get the steelhead, because you guys have all the great stuff in the rivers up there for the kings and grayling and everything like that. But you have crazy sockeye runs too. But down here is a little bit better for steelhead. So you primarily guide in more of the Mat-Su Valley area. Yeah. Is that because you didn't want to deal with the Kenai Peninsula and the Kasilof and that madness, or is there a rivalry between the Mat-Su and the Kenai Peninsula?
No, I wouldn't say there's any rivalry. I know that previous outfitter I worked for last year, they had connections and they would send people down to the Kenai and with those other outfitters. But for me personally, it was when I first moved up here, I got in contact with the outfitter I worked for last year, and I'd been guiding down in Washington for several years, and I wanted to find something close to home, close to Anchorage, and being up there on those Parks Highway streams, I'm about an hour and a half away, whereas the Kenai could be 2+ up to 3 hours away. So just trying to be somewhere close to home. And that was the closest I could be to Anchorage, because my wife's going to nursing school. That's what really initially brought us to Alaska, to Anchorage. And so I didn't want to be gone from her for too awful long. I didn't want to have a super, super long drive every day, and just tried to make my home base out of Anchorage.
Yeah. It would seem like you'd almost have to live down there for the summer if you're going to do that, because that would be just an unreasonable daily trip.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's borderline unreasonable what I was doing last year too. I mean, I wanted to be home as much as possible and be with my family, but an hour and a half one way twice a day, that really adds up, especially when you're leaving around between 7:30 in the morning. You're getting to Willow at like 8:30, 9 o'clock, and then you're packing the boat up, and then you're meeting clients as they're pulling up. You're floating all day. You got to go back to the property, drop the boat off, unload everything, and then drive home. And you're sometimes, like, if you hit construction on the roadway coming back, I mean, there were some nights I didn't get back home until like 10 o'clock that night. So they're super long days and a lot of sitting time in the car.
When my wife and I went up there for our honeymoon in June, we were surprised and also not surprised. We're down the Kenai Peninsula, and we saw that there were definite access points, and there were large swaths that were public, but you couldn't get to them. So massively crowded river, hard to get access on some of these spots. And the upper Kenai, there's a Sea Lac Lake on the top side of Sea Lac Lake. That was a little bit more fun, a little bit different, but it doesn't seem like you can explore a lot of that. Is along the park's highway similar to that? Is it pretty much you have to go to these designated areas? Is it possible to hike in different spots, or is it pretty much you either float it or you go to the known access points?
There's a lot of opportunity on a lot of these streams. I mean, you do have your obvious access points. A lot of times, like where the park's highway crosses one of those creeks, like Montana or Willow. But for the most part, there's several access points upstream, downstream, wherever there's like a bridge thing. Usually, the mouths of the creeks will have like take Willow for example, that'll have a like a boat launch. I guess maybe Willow is the only one that has a designated boat launch at the mouth, but from those places there's a lot of opportunity to walk up and downstream because a lot of that is public, or it's like Willow's got the state recreation area, so you can walk up and down that as pretty much as far as you can until the brush just gets too impenetrable. That's my biggest issue, is just it gets so thick. But yeah, there's a lot of room to explore, a lot of trails probably started as animal trails, slowly turned into angler trails, and you can follow a lot of those places up or down and access the river. A lot of walking you can do, and you can get into some amazing country that if you're not willing to do so much walking, those are the places that the rafts and the drift boats and jet sleds can get up into that don't see a lot of angler pressure from the bank.
Mhm. So would you say that it's easier to find areas where you can walk long distances in that area as opposed to the Kenai Kasilov?
So I personally actually haven't been spent much time down on the peninsula. I haven't really fished any of those rivers down there, but from what I've heard, talking to clients, talking to other outfitters, and just recreational anglers that live up here, yeah, it sounds like there's a lot more access up there on the parks.
Nice. What type of float trips do you do? Do you do it's just a couple hours, like half day, full day? Does it have to be a full day? Are you rowing? Are you jet powered? What do you got?
Yeah, so we're doing day trips on the rafts. Usually pushing off from the bank at like 9 o'clock in the morning, and then getting done sometime around 5 or 6. It's hard to do a half day float in that river just because, taking Willow for example, it's so windy and twisty. In a straight line you could probably be to the Susitna and probably 4 miles, but as windy as it is, you're looking at more like 6.5, 7 miles. So it just takes a while, and I've talked to my outfitter about it, and you lose just as many flies in a half day trip as you do a full day trip. So you might as well just do the full day trip, because you're going to be pulling over, retying flies. And then so many of those places, you've got like specific log jams, you've got sloughs that you're fishing when the silvers are in, that you really want to spend a lot of time on those key areas. It's just really hard to just fly by some of those places, especially since the river is so small. I mean, there were times last summer we're floating in, it's like 250 CFS. I mean, they're super small creeks, and just trying to fish that from a raft the whole way is kind of a recipe for disaster a lot of times, because you're losing so many bugs and how wooded those creeks are up there.
What are you fishing as far as flies and whatnot?
We're fishing a lot of streamers, honestly. When it comes breakup, we're gonna be fishing some flesh, maybe some beads, really washed out, like your apricot kind of beads, your like peach fuzz, something that's really faded. And then you're kind of rolling into your streamer game, because the fish up there will go out of the Willow, they go out of Little Willow, they go sit in the Sioux. And then once things break up, they're starting to move back up river, and they're trying to eat anything they can. So salmon smolt are soon afterwards as they're making their way down river, fishing a lot of little streamers. So your woolly buggers, your little sparkle minnows and stuff, trying to imitate the smolt. And then after that, I honestly don't fish much more than a Dalai Lama. I'm just fishing that basically like mid to late June until the end of the season, because there's a lot of freshwater lamprey in those systems. And I've personally found some. I mean, you've got some that migrate with some of those salmon, and my outfitter last year sent me a picture of like a 18-inch lamprey that he picked up out of the river. Yeah,
I hate
it was
those
pretty
things,
gross.
man.
Yeah,
Horrible.
exactly. But I've found some, that the little babies are like 3 or 4 inches long. Sometimes they'll kick up a little bit of mud. You're hopping out, throwing the anchor out, or just wade fishing, and you'll see Dalai Lama, and it seems to be the best pattern that I've really could say I could fish all season.
Do you find that I'm sure you tie your own flies, right?
Yep. Yep.
Do you find that sometimes people get too caught up in tweaking or changing things when they should just go with what works? Like we're trying to put an extra little of this on this or dress it up, and does it actually make things any better? Have you found?
Um, I would say tweaking little things like last year I was playing around with different colors of my Dalai Lamas, and I mean a lot of times you find it's using the Dolly again as an example is you're finding olive and white, you're finding black and olive, finding black and white. You're not finding a lot of those colors in a lot of shops or offered in a lot of places that are your purple and white or your orange and white. So just kind of playing out the different colors, but again, just keeping that basic profile of a streamer, or excuse me, of the Dalai Lama, really seems to be more beneficial than trying to just change all these different things. Just sticking with that main pattern and then just slightly changing things. Another thing I found is just downsizing it. Mainly your dollies are finding are, maybe 3.5 to 4.5 inches long. So a lot of times I'll downsize that to maybe less than 3 inches, or sometimes for like when the silvers, I'm going up to like an 8-inch long Dalai Lama. So playing around with the size overall, maybe a little bit of a color scheme, but I'm not going to put a lot of effort into tweaking a bunch of little things, especially if I'm going to be guiding clients, because I've literally had it where I'll tie a fly on, first cast, boom, it's into a log jam, snap it off. Tie another one on, next cast, boom, it's into a log jam, snap it off. So I don't want to be spending more than a couple minutes per fly, because I know that clients are going to lose it. And I tie my flies accordingly. Like I know that they're going to lose it. And it's not too much of a bummer when they do. I've been tying Dalai Lamas all winter. I've got several boxes full of them. And I'll be tying every night after trips, getting ready for the next day, because I know that I'm still going to need them, even though I got a surplus now. If I don't keep up with it throughout the season, I'm going to get to a point where I'm going to have to just sit down and crank a bunch out. So
yeah. How many variations do you have? Do you have like 15 per color in a certain size?
So last year, like when I was first experimenting with different colors of Dalai Lamas or woolly buggers or whatever, I'd probably tie up 3 or 4, just because I wasn't sure. I didn't want to spend a lot of time tying something that I didn't know if it would work or not. And so I've maybe 3 or 4 personally, and working on with a larger crew of guides last year, I was able to give a couple to some other guys, like, hey, fish these today. Tell me what you think. Do they work well? What would you want to tweak about it? And getting out on the river, I would quickly realize that if it was a good pattern, I'd probably lose those 3 or 4 within the first couple of hours, sometimes even sooner, whether that be on a log or a fish. But I would quickly realize I would need more of it. And I get to the point where it's like with clients, I'd be like, hey, I'm out of these good flies today. I apologize. We're going to have to go find something else that's working. But once I found a pattern, or a color or a size difference that I really liked and it was really working well, I would go back and I would tie a bunch that night, and I wouldn't want to get back on the water with any less than a dozen of that for the next day, because I knew I would probably end up losing that many flies again the following day, and maybe have a couple to spare for the next. So right now I'm looking at my box I have with me. I think I have 5 different variations of a Dalai Lama in my day box, something I'm going to carry with me on the boat. And that probably has close to 2 dozen of every one of those colors. And then I'm going to have another box, whether that be in my trailer or that be back home, of probably at least another couple of dozen of all of those colors as well. That way I just always have some on deck. But I'd say I'd almost feel naked if I didn't go out with any fewer than a dozen of each one of those colors, because like it's saying again, on especially on those parks highway streams, that they're so small and wooded that you're going to lose flies. It's not if you're going to lose flies, it's how many you're going to lose. So I got to have a bunch of every single one, and it might be heavy. It might be a lot to carry around, but I feel like I don't feel confident if I don't have that many with me.
Yeah. Is it pretty consistent fishing as far as the river isn't really changing course? It's not the Willow isn't a huge, it's a creek, not a full on river, but
Mhm.
did you see some variation changing in the sloughs and then a bunch of added debris and stuff like that, or is it fairly consistent year in, year out?
Um, so last year's my first season on it, so I can't really say much on year in and year out, but I would say it does. Just talking to other guides, other outfitters. But I definitely saw it change throughout the year. I mean, we get a couple of big floods, you get a big rain. I remember, I think it was in August of last year. We had some big rains. I flew out west. I did a 8-day, 9-day trip out west and came back, and there were logs in places I'd never seen logs before. There were runs that were full of rocks that hadn't been full of rocks the week before. So um, even throughout the season, I've seen change. So I'm definitely planning on there being a little bit of change when I come back here in May.
Hmm. What's been the best like resource for people? Because a lot of people kind of like or attracted to the guide life, and they kind of go out there, and some of the successful ones seem like they have a couple people who've really been helpful to them. What are some of the biggest things to kind of keep in mind if someone is contemplating going up and becoming a river guide up in Alaska? What are some things that they need to keep in mind as far as learning and growing from other people?
One of the major things I would say is finding a good guide crew to surround yourself with. Um, I've been able to work with a bunch of different guides and several different outfitters in my time, and I'm really happy and really privileged to have started with the crew that I did back in Washington, because those guys, they were invested in me. They wanted to see me succeed, because in turn the whole outfit would succeed, and just be better guides, people that want to teach, people that just want to promote you and help you follow your passion, becoming a guide. And I think just surrounding yourself with the best people possible, and if you are joining an outfitter or a guide staff, reaching out to those people ahead of time, reaching out to maybe clients, people have maybe left reviews, ask those outfitters for any references that you could call and ask them how their trips were. I've personally found that out over the last couple of years, is to just like you would want to, if you're booking a trip with a guide or an outfitter, if you want to vet the different outfitters to see who would the best be go on a trip with, I found that it's beneficial to do the same if you're wanting to work for that outfitter. So yeah, do your research ahead of time on the outfitter itself, on the people that work for the outfitter, and then just looking for cool dudes that you really vibe with, I think is the biggest thing. And then again, finding somebody who wants to teach. I know that the head guide where I worked last year, super awesome dude. I really look up to him. He taught me a lot, and being able to actually live in Anchorage, not coming up for the season, which a lot of folks do, and there's nothing against that, but actually living in Alaska, and being able to fish those waters you're going to guide from as soon as breakup happens to as soon as everything freezes up is super beneficial to learning the water, like going out ahead of time, before you're really guiding, like learning the river, how to row it, learning some of the best runs, and then just having access, I think is super beneficial to wanting to be a successful guide.
Hmm. How are some of the other guides as far as being friendly, even if you don't necessarily know them? Are they pretty cordial? What about the locals? Is there like a guide versus local type thing?
No, I don't think I've seen that at all. There's not a lot of outfitters up there on the parks. And for the most part, we get along. Um, I mean, last year, the outfitter I was working with and the outfitter I'm working with now would send trips back and forth to each other, like, hey, we're booked for the day, go check this guy out.
Nice.
And then they'd be the same way if they were booked. They would send people to us. Um, and then even like gear. I remember there were sometimes last year that maybe one of the outfits didn't have the right size boots and waders for clients. They call up the other one, let them borrow that for the day. So in a lot of ways, we try to work together. And as long as we vibe well, we have the same ethics, we have the same mindset on how we want to treat the fishery. We tend to get along pretty well. And same thing goes for the locals. A lot of us, well, I'm down here in Anchorage, but I know that a lot of the outfitters up there tend to be a little more tapped in the community, living up there, owning property up there, and they seem to be getting along really well with the other locals in the community.
Yeah, I used to live in California, and I would fish the lower Sacramento River up in the Redding,
Mm-hmm.
or yeah, up in Redding above it, but in that general area. And there'd be some guides who would talk a lot of trash to the other guides, and other guides who were just kind of cordial. And some people would just take their clients right to where the reds were and would just, annihilate these spawning fish. And it was just, it wasn't illegal, but man, there were some people who thought, just leave, you got to leave those fish alone, or they'd try to, it was illegal to fish for kings up there, obviously, because there's very few left.
Mm-hmm.
But there's definitely some competition. It kind of made for weird times on the river, and you were kind of glad when you got a guide who guided for an outfit that had the same sort of ethic of, hey, we're going to catch our fish. We don't need to be going through the reds. We don't need to be anchoring in the reds, and it's taking after these fish. So it's kind of cool to be with or be in an environment where people kind of help each other out and then have the resource in mind, because you're making money off it now. But if you destroy the resource, then you're destroying yourself.
Oh, 100%. And up here, I've seen the opposite. I see where a lot of times the outfitters are they get along pretty well. So that's always good. And it seems like, especially if it's a newer outfit or a newer guide staff, they tend to get along. It just seems to be, like I said, if you're an older outfitter, it's been established on the water for a while, you're not getting along so well with the other people. It just seems like maybe over time something happens. But again, I haven't seen that so much up here.
Yeah, I fished the Yakima once. We were visiting some friends in, was it Clay Ellum? Is that the
Mm-hmm.
place on the Yakima?
Yeah.
Um, and very briefly, it's just one of those, okay, get the license real quick, head down to the river for like a 1 day, hopefully to catch a fish and kind of say that I fished it. It was kind of cool. It was fall, I think, maybe when we were there, but it was just kind of a drive-by expedition. But it was nice river, cool to get on new water. Um,
Mhm.
Are there some rivers that they're maybe in the West or Alaska that are some kind of hidden gems that you've only briefly touched that you really want to get back to and fish again?
Oh man. Um, to be totally honest, in Alaska, I haven't been able to fish very much since pretty much as soon as I moved up here last year in April. Once the guide season started and again breakup happened, I really didn't get to fish for myself. I pretty much just guided from May through October. So I honestly, there's a bunch of water in Alaska that I'd like to go and try to figure out that I haven't been able to. But back home, um, there are some areas that um, I would definitely like to go back to now, having the knowledge that I've gained guiding in Alaska for a year and trying to put that towards some of the those fisheries back home and across the West that I think would be uh, would help me have a more productive time on that water now that I've had another experience in Alaska. So yeah, to answer your question, there definitely are some creeks and some rivers and even some lakes that I'd like to go back to now and fish with the knowledge that I have.
You got some names for some of those? Like I want to go back and I want to fish in Arkansas. I was able to fish the White River in Arkansas. There's some big old huge brown trout, and caught some rainbows and I caught a couple decent brown trout. But man, that river for sure I need to get back to at some point. But it's so random. I don't know if I ever will.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then of course the Upper Sacramento, the Lower Sacramento are awesome rivers. Um, Fish the Platte River in Wyoming. Like, do you have any like a hit list of Western rivers that are specific that you've been to and want to go back, or stuff that's on the list?
Yeah, I'd have to say top of my list is the Green River in Utah.
Mm.
I don't know why that is. I guess maybe it was a little. I know it's got a little bit of white water in some of those. I don't know if it's a little bit. They do have white water. They probably have quite a lot in some sections. And having experience on whitewater last year, that kind of intrigues me. But also just sight fishing. I love to sight fish for trout. Back home in Washington, there were spring creeks that I could go sight fish for trout, and that was one of the things that surprised me up here. Was how much sight fishing I could do, like up on Willow, where you could literally watch a trout and move off the bottom to eat a Dalai Lama as you're pulling it away from a log, and I really enjoy that. So being over to the Green River and trying to sight fish a trout is definitely pretty high up on my bucket list. The Owyhee in Oregon, that's another one that's definitely on my hit list. I said I love fishing spring creeks and small tailwaters. That's always been something I've really enjoyed. I don't know why it is, and I think last year kind of helped spark my interest in small bugs. I always like to tie small nymphs like size 18s, 20s, 22s, 24s. And after fishing streamers so much last year, which don't get me wrong, I really enjoy, there's something about tying on a super, super tiny little bug to catch a big trout that I really, really enjoy and look forward to. So that's probably one reason I like those tailwaters, spring creeks, is because a lot of times you're fishing scuds and sow bugs and
Yeah.
small mayfly nymphs and little midges.
Yeah, I like the violence of big fly fishing, streamer fishing,
Mm-hmm.
but or even mouse fishing, you know. But man, there's something like you said about that smaller type fly. I've only fished smaller than a 20 once, and the hatch was so outrageous I couldn't tell where my fly was,
Yeah.
and it was just super. It was really frustrating. I'd never been in a situation like that, and the hatch was only about 30 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
And while I love the sheer volume of fish we can get up here, things like that really make me want to go and just be in that experience one more time and just figure that out. There's so much variation in fly fishing, and I think people take it for granted or underestimate it. But man, there's so much great stuff to do. How do you tie those, and then
Mm-hmm.
how do you keep track of your fly when it's small, nothing on the water?
After years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by big wireless providers, if we've learned anything, it's that there's always a catch. So when I first heard that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless starting at just $15 a month, I thought, what's the catch? But after talking to them and using their service, it all made sense. There isn't one. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they're the first company to sell wireless service online only. They cut out the cost of retail stores and pass those sweet savings directly to you. For anyone who hates their phone bill, Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month. I was hesitant about having to get a new phone and a new phone number, but with Mint, you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone and your same phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Mint Mobile gives you the best rate whether you're buying for one or for a family, and at Mint, families start at 2 lines. All plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Switch to Mint Mobile and get premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and to get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/waypoint. That is mintmobile.com/waypoint. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/waypoint.
So tying them, I definitely have to break out the glasses so I can see that small. I've always tied with smaller thread. I've always, no matter if I'm tying a big streamer or something small, I'm using like my 8/0 unit thread, the smallest sizes, because I've always believed that more thread wraps are better than fewer big thread wraps or with a bigger thread. So just downsizing my thread, being really delicate with my wraps. My bobbin I use now has a tension that I can set on there. I think that's super important for tying on smaller hooks. And then purchasing quality hooks, quality materials. When you're getting to that thin of a piece of metal between you and the trout, you definitely want the best that you can buy, because it's if you're hooking a big fish on something that thin, if you don't have something good quality, that hook's going to bend out or snap on you. So really paying attention to that. And when I'm fishing them, I'm either going to be, let's say, like the caddis on the Yakima. Usually, you're not getting down that small, but there are times when you can't tell your bug from a live bug, or you can't see it very well because it is small. And I'm tying on like maybe a little piece of like chartreuse, like poly yarn on top, so I can just the top of it. It helps me distinguish that from the other bugs. And since it's on top, theoretically the trout shouldn't be able to see it. Only I or my client should be able to see it. So if I can tie mine similar enough to look like a live thing from the fish's point of view, but tie it a little bit different on top, whether that be some kind of white wing or again that chartreuse poly yarn, maybe a little piece of orange on top, that'll really help me distinguish that from the live ones on the water. And then if I'm fishing something like subsurface, whether that be a scud or a midge, I really like a really delicate presentation. So I like to really fish the New Zealand strike indicators. Just super light yarn. I treat it just like I would any kind of dry fly, adding floating to it, really combing it out, cleaning it up in between fish, or after a while hitting that with some dry shake, trying to dry that out, because they're super sensitive. It doesn't take much for a fish to pull that under. Even if a fish doesn't take that aggressively, as soon as the fish bites that fly and it slows that line down, it'll pull that thing under. So having something sensitive like that, and even going so far as to trying to camouflage my indicators, like on some of the spring creeks back home, I would use like a greenish color New Zealand indicator, because there was a lot of aquatic vegetation that would drift down in the river. And so I would try to make my indicator look like some of that vegetation by fishing an indicator about the same color, so that if a fish saw it going overhead, they just think it's another weed or a cattail or something going overhead, when in reality it's that indicator. So just trying to be super subtle and trying to benefit yourself by trying to help you distinguish it. Another thing is when I'm fishing scuds back home, a lot of times people are thinking olive scuds, gray scuds, and those are things you can't see very well. But over time, from personal fishing and from guiding and from just doing research, changing your colors something a little bit brighter, like an orange. I can see an orange scud, but then also finding out that scuds, when they die, when they get sick, they'll change to that kind of orangish or pink color. And so in reality, it might benefit me by fishing that brighter color, because the fish see that as something that's a little bit easier to pick off.
Mm-hmm. What else do you go as far as preference when it comes to fly line? Do you tie your own leaders? Do you go with a tapered leader? All that stuff, your other rig.
When it comes to fly lines and fly rods, I personally like a fast action rod, and I like a weight forward line. I like the lines, that are a half a size. Sometimes I'll overline a rod so that I really can get that fast taper on there, fast action, really get my line to where I want it to be, especially if I'm fishing like a Dalai Lama with some split shot, or I'm fishing a big bead braid. I want something really thick and something fast that I can really get out there and lay on the water. When it comes to my leaders, I build my own leaders. I kind of learned it from my previous outfitter in Washington, where when we're nymphing, we're fishing 3 bugs down there at a time and a weight. And so a general, like a taper leader you might buy at the store isn't necessarily the best for presenting those flies. So I started using what's called the 90-degree nymph method, or at least that's the name I was taught. And that's basically using like a 25 pound section of chameleon maxima, and tying a perfection loop or some kind of loop knot in the end and one side of that and the other. So you got a section maybe 1.5 to 2 feet long of chameleon maxima, got an end loop on both ends. One of that is looped to the end of your fly line, and then off of the other end, I'm going to tie on maybe a section of, let's say, 14 pound maxima off of that loop, and that might be, let's say, another 3 or 4 feet long. And then from there, tying double or triple surgeons to 12 pound or 8 pound maxima, and then to my fly with a split shot above it. Going back up to that chameleon section of maxima, that 25 pound, that's where I'm going to put my indicator, and I can adjust my depth accordingly by moving the indicator all the way towards my fly line to get it deeper, or all the way to the lower end of that section of chameleon so I can go a little bit shallower. That's going to keep my indicator from sliding down all the way to my flies. That's the most crucial part, I think, is you have that knot that you've already tied into the line. That's going to keep your indicator from sliding down too far, and then just getting too shallow. Because there's been a lot of times where you'll have clients fishing, or I'll be personally fishing, and after half hour, I'm like, what the heck's going on? You pull it up and your indicator is like a foot away from your bug, and you've been fishing 5 to 10 feet of water the whole time. And you're like, oh, well, that's why I wasn't catching any fish. So having that knot there in that system has been good for up here. Even I'm not going quite as long as I was back home. I mean, back home, I was going 5, 6, 7, 8 feet. Up here, even with my streamers, my Dalai Lamas, my woolly buggers, I'm still fishing that 90-degree nymph method. I'm just maybe going from the bobber to the fly. It might just be, I always use I'm doing it right now. People listen probably can't see it, but I go from the end of my hand to the middle of my chest, which is probably, 3.5 feet, maybe 3 feet, something like that. I don't like to fish it super long, just because there is so much wood in these parks, highway, streams. And a lot of times that indicator, I'm just using that to determine where my clients' flies are. Mm-hmm. And then when it comes to indicators, I really like the airlocks that have the adjustable little screw on there, so I'm not putting kinks in my line.
Right. Yeah.
I haven't tried the new ones yet. I saw that they've been coming out lately with those ones that like screw in the middle. I definitely want to get my hands on some of those. And then again, going back to really trying to kind of camouflage my gear and trying to really blend in. I fish a white indicator, and I know that's hard for clients to see, and a lot of times it's hard for me to see. But I think that really helps to blend in with the big chunks of foam going down river, the big clumps of bubbles, because any little thing that I can do to try to trick these trout, I'm going to do for my clients. And the one time I was like, oh, I probably shouldn't be fishing a bright indicator is last spring when I was down in Yakutat for a week. Super slow fishing. The steelhead was not good. Still cold. The fish hadn't really moved up river, and the head guide and I were down. This is just all fun fishing. We were down towards the mouth, the lower launch or lower takeout, and he's standing on a log. I'm standing next to him, and we see the steelhead running up the bank, and it's only in like 3 or 4 feet of water. And so he's calling it out to me where it's at. I'm running down, unhooking a bead off my rod, and I'm running down to where he's showing me where to cast it. And I can see this fish, and I throw a cast out there, maybe 10, 15 feet in front of this fish. So I wasn't scared with the splash, and this thing's working its way up river. And you can almost see that it acknowledges my bead, and he's swimming up to my bead, and he's maybe 2 or 3 feet away from my bead. And you can see that fish look up, see my indicator, and then just take off, pass. And I was either fishing an orange or a pink indicator. And I think as soon as he saw that on the surface, he was like, nope, I'm out of here. And he just
Yeah,
took
it's
off.
weird.
So
Yeah. I've had the opposite happen where like I thought I had a fish that was coming to the coming to the fly bin, ended up just attacking the indicator. And I thought, great, slow day of steelhead fishing, and the one that decides to take something decides to take the indicator.
exactly. And I mean, I've had that as well. Especially back home, you have a lot of trout that would take that thing. I don't know what they think it is. Maybe they think it's a big salmon fly, or I don't know. Sometimes I just get interested. Like I remember I was hunting bears with my wife back home, and it was August. It was hot, and in the middle of the day when we weren't hunting, we were sitting at the bottom of the valley, right in, like, feet in the creek. It's super cool, sitting in the shade. And I would see these little cutthroats sitting in these little pools, and I would just take like little twigs or little pieces, like little cones, pine cones, throwing it in there. And these trout are so opportunistic and so hungry. You'd see this trout come up and eat the pine cone, go back down, and then maybe half a second later, you'd see that pine cone pop up at the bottom of the pool, because they're so opportunistic. They're eating everything that could be food, and if it's not food, they're spitting it out. And you throw a moth or a butterfly in there, and you'd see that thing get slurped up real quick. So I think a lot of times, I like, just like I tell clients, they don't have hands. They can't go grab something, and they can't feel it. And they can't investigate it with hands or with their fins. They have to use their mouth. That's the only thing they can do. So if it's something that they are curious about and they want to check it out more, they're going to put it in their mouth. It's kind of like a little kid. They got to put everything in their mouth.
Yeah. So I just want to make sure, I'm not going to edit this out. Can you do, or do you have a little video that kind of shows or illustrates a Willow Creek rig? Was that for trout or salmon, or is it roughly the same thing, just depending on the fly that you were describing earlier?
I don't have a video necessarily.
Well, here it is. Here it is. This is you have this episode will release in about 2 weeks. So you were on the clock. How about that?
Sounds good. I can definitely do that. And I will say that is mainly for the trout and the grayling that we're catching. I had clients catch salmon on that same rig, but once I'm going for salmon, I'm mostly, I guess I am fishing the same rig now I think of it. I just don't fish with an indicator so much.
Mm-hmm. Right. Do you have a YouTube channel?
I do. I have a personal YouTube that I've kind of played with on and off. It's just my name, Kyle Wilkinson. I've have some hunting films on there, just short films that aren't super great, that self-done, some little fly fishing videos. But with, as you mentioned earlier, with my buddy Keaton, we started the Young Guides podcast, and we have a YouTube channel on there, and we're really trying to build up more of that, those kind of like how-to videos. And that's definitely one he and I have talked about, is trying to tie up some, like, how you put your leaders together, your setups. So yeah, that I can hop on that, definitely get something up to direct to.
Yeah, it's kind of a tough thing when you have a job, and then you have the side job, and then you try to do other stuff for fun, and you want to provide some sort of value. But man, the amount of stuff that's out there there's just so much, and so much of it is shot with such expensive equipment. So if you're shooting stuff with an iPhone, just like, I mean, iPhones are way better than they were, but if you got someone out there with a $2,000 camera and a drone, right? Yeah, you just almost have no chance. It's hard if you don't have the editing equipment. So you want to get stuff out there and you get 9 views or something like that. But it's hard work to really put together a whole bunch of stuff, but it is pretty fun.
Oh, for sure. And that's honestly what I went to school for, was digital journalism. And that's something that I've always, even before I went to school for it, I always like creating content, whether that be fly tying videos or how-to videos. I remember the first one I think I ever posted was a GoPro, a video I shot on my GoPro, like 3, and just a bunch of clips of us catching trout out of a boat. There was a bunch of really loud dubstep that was unnecessary in the background, and some terrible editing, but it was just something I enjoyed doing, is creating that content. But yeah, it is difficult finding time. to create that and edit it and keep up with things and keep up with people who that is their job, because you got to try to stay up to date. You got to try to stay current, especially with the different algorithms you might have on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube, and trying to stay consistent enough to keep coming up, to come up in popular searches, or just to pop up on somebody's feed. Because if you're not consistent and you're kind of here and there creating content, some of it's kind of all over the place, you're not going to come up as much, for whether that be for your personal followers or subscribers to find you, or whether that be random people that stumble across your channel.
Yeah, there's so much like flashy, stand out. And so you get a lot of those videos, and some of my favorite stuff are just the people who have the honest, real look. I mean, it has to be a quality too, because some people have 15 minutes of B-roll and then the last 10 minutes of them not getting anything. You're like, oh, wow, that was 25 minutes of pretty much nothing that led up to nothing. Yeah. It was super honest and there was a vested interest in it. But when it came down to crunch time, like the camera wasn't on for the one fish or whatever. But the stuff that I like the most just seems like it's the honest person who's just getting after it, and it's quality. They definitely have some knowledge about angles and about depth and all that. But, when you try to go too flashy, too full send, too production, I just kind of loses my interest. But I don't know, that sells for a lot of people. So who knows?
Yep. And that's definitely one thing that my buddy and I have tried to do, is just to try to be honest and try to be as down to earth as possible, and definitely providing quality content. And that might not mean super high quality video or super high quality audio, or sometimes just the interactions he and I might have with each other. On some topics, I might not vibe super well, or some days we're super off, but we always try to provide maybe the best content possible for the listener or for the viewer, and just trying to be super honest, down to earth, and just trying to be super helpful. I think in some ways helps us to reach more people, because we never want to put on a facade that this is us when we're on the podcast and then this is us off the podcast. We're just trying to be as real as possible, and I think doing that, you attract a lot more people than if you're being fake just for the camera or just for the podcast.
Yeah. Who are some of the like content makers that you follow, like podcast wise, video wise? Do you watch the fly fishing film tours? Do you read John Gierak? What do you follow, and what influences you?
Yeah, I've always been into podcasts. Definitely listen to your podcast, Jeff. Try to listen to as many Alaskan based podcasts as I can. Alaska Wild Project.
Yeah, good dudes.
Yeah, super good dudes. You talk to them. I listened to Tyler Friel on his Tundra Talk podcast. Back when I was down lower 48, I was listening to like the wet fly swing a little bit more, just since I was down there. It seems like my podcast preferences have shifted geographically as I shifted.
Yeah.
But like the Tom Rosenbauer's, the Orvis Fly Fishing Guide podcast, right. That was definitely, I think that was the first one I ever listened to. Then some hunting podcasts, your Hunt Backcountry podcast is a super good one that I like to listen to. Again, that was probably my first hunting podcast.
Exo people?
Yeah, that's that Exo Mountain Gear.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then just sometimes I'll stumble across some. Maybe there's somebody I know or that I look up to in the industry, or like Brian Call. That's a good one that I like to listen to his podcast. If it's a figure in the industry that I look up to, or that I really like their content, I'll search them on a podcast. And if I see they came up on a podcast, I'll go listen to that episode. I'm like, oh, I kind of like that podcast as well. And then I'll follow that podcast, and always trying to listen to new things that are related to topics that I like. And then I try to adopt maybe some of their styles and how I might put it into my own content. If I like their intros, or I like how they conduct conversation, or how they what they post on social media or online, I really look up to them. And in regards to like the fly fishing film tour, I've always gone to those back home. The IF4, I went to that. I don't know if I've ever been to like what's the archery one? I can't remember what that
Total Archery Challenge.
No, no,
I haven't been to any of those things at all
okay.
ever, so I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, so yeah, it's one of those that they have the hunting films. I guess I've been to one, but I can't remember what it was called. But I haven't been to so many of those. But I'm just always looking for content that has a good story, quality stuff. I watch a lot of Billy Moles. A lot of his stuff is shot on like a nice camcorder, but he doesn't have like a production crew. He doesn't have all this external mics and all these different things. It's real and it's raw, and that's what I enjoy the most. Is if you're a real person doing it, you're not acting for the camera, you're not acting for the podcast. You're just sharing and doing what you do on almost pretty much a daily basis or for your job. That's what I want to listen to and try to emulate on my own content.
Yeah. I've looked at or sought out podcasts from people that I admire, and I was amazed at how similar the podcasts were. It was like asking the same questions of these people. So it's like, I've heard this thing 5 times now. And so I've stopped seeking that out just because it's so redundant. I think there's some value in listening to what other people have been on a podcast. And then if you have them on yours, to not ask those questions sometimes. And granted, there could be, it could be the first time for your listeners to hear something like that. But man, I just got tired of hearing the same stories about these people doing the same thing. It's like, give me something new, right? Make it individualized. Like, these are all the things and the facts that we know we could look up. So ask something else, not weird and, gotcha journalism or anything like that, but just find an interesting angle.
Oh yeah, for sure. And not trying to self promote or anything right now, but on our podcast, we really like to ask questions that a lot of people might not think of, like just taking younger guides, for example. I mean, that's kind of what we base the podcast off of. Is you don't hear a lot from those up and coming guides, young guides around my age. I'm 20, 23, I'll be 24. So your mid to early 20s, your teens, you don't hear from that group of people as much. And that's what really like to focus on. And then when you're kind of reaching outside of that pool of people, we like to look for people that maybe haven't come up on podcasts, or guides or outfitters or biologists that people have never heard of. Yeah. And really trying to just find these new and interesting people that have a really great story. They just haven't had the platform to talk about it yet.
Yeah. I had Corey Jacobson on to talk about elk hunting, which is awesome. A big guy in the elk hunting industry. But then I had his cameraman on, and I had more people listen to that podcast than Corey Jacobson, which is funny because you would think that, recognizable name, he's going to be the one that more people are going to listen to. But people liked the podcast with the cameraman even more. So yeah, those things are pretty cool. That's what I'm interested in. Obviously, I don't represent the entire market. I represent only, people who are like me. So there's no real right or wrong way to do things, but it is nice to be able to do what you like and what you think should be done, and have people listen.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
So what do you got for a closer, man? Where can people find you? What are you looking forward to in this next year?
Yeah. I think what I'm looking forward to the most is just getting back out on the water. It's been a long winter. My winter job, I work at a company here in Anchorage called Heather's Choice. Working production, cooking food, dehydrating food, packaging food, sending it out. We just rebranded last week. New packaging, new meals, tweaks to meals. And so we're super stoked to bring that out to the world. And that's been super fun to be a part of, working with Heather Kelly at Heather's Choice. She's been super awesome just to be around, and as a business like that's growing so much right now. And just being around Heather a lot of times is super inspiring, and seeing how she's such a big entrepreneur, and especially in the outdoor industry. That's been super great. And then looking forward to getting back out on the water and just guiding clients, meeting people. That's one of my favorite things, is just meeting people from all over the country. I've had clients from across the globe, and hearing their stories, hearing what they do, and kind of maybe their fisheries, and especially seeing their expressions when they hook into their first Alaskan trout or they catch a grayling. Like I remember my first trip last year, this guy really wanted a grayling. That was like his bucket list fish, and we got him a grayling within the first couple hours, and just he was super stoked. And that's what I like to see on my trips, are people that are super excited to be in Alaska and to be guiding, and I just feed off of that energy. It's great to be around, and especially kids, especially when the pinks are running and you got kids. It's nonstop action all day until you're basically, both you and the kids are passed out at the end of the day because you're so tired of unhooking fish and they're so tired of catching fish. That almost gets, I wouldn't say boring, but it gets super tiring. So I'm definitely looking forward to that and creating memories for more people, and for creating memories of my own. And to follow me, I guess, would you mentioned earlier, my Instagram is flybum_101. And then the Young Guides podcast, we also have an Instagram at the Young Guides podcast. We're on pretty much all podcast platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and then our website, theyoungguidespodcast.com, and the YouTube channel. So really trying to grow that, just all under that Young Guides podcast umbrella.
Nice. Yeah, looking forward to see how things go for you this summer. Good luck, and can't wait for those videos on how to fish the Willow Creek area. For
sure, yeah. I'm super stoked.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Appreciate your time, and take care. Good luck with the podcast.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Jeff.